All right, let's open up to the audience. What we're going to do is invite questions. If you have a comment, please make it very brief. If you have a question, also make it brief. Start by identifying yourself. And I'll take a couple, and then we'll go back and forth until we run out of time. So, looking over here.
Shall I go ahead?
Please.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Faria Mohideen, and I work for the Tax Justice Network. And so this is actually a question for Minister Ahmed. How important, or rather, what is the role for donors in helping Nigeria tackle one of the biggest issues facing women, which is unpaid care work? And if Minister Bibeau would like to talk about how Canada would consider helping a country like Nigeria tackle that issue.
Great, thanks. So you guys have to keep track, because I'm going to add a couple of questions here, okay? Do you need paper? I'm sorry. I'm springing that on you. Do you have a pen? Okay, good. Up in the front row here.
Hi, thanks very much. I'm Molly Anders from DevEx. Canada is clearly charting a path for itself in the family planning space, and it's remarkable also to see this kind of historic departure from the U.S. administration, who's typically quite aligned in terms of aid goals. But I wonder how the Trump administration is serving as sort of a lessons learned. I think it's 18 months now until Canada's next election, and Nigeria, I think it's maybe 2 years. What lessons can we learn about making sure that this policy lives out through those elections and becomes actually like a legacy of Canadian development?
Interesting question. And the gentleman right behind here.
Malcolm Bruce, member of the House of Lords, former chairman of the International Development Committee. First of all, welcome back, Canada. We've missed you for the last few years. So I'm with the last question. And it's good to see you taking such a proactive part in the conversation and leading the debate. That's great. But I have a very specific question, which is the connection between gender and feminist issues and disability, because all of these issues about early marriage, lack of contraception, unsafe abortion leads to a higher proportion of disabled people in a situation where they're very often unsupported. Do you agree that there should be a connection? Because if people realize that if they don't address the feminist issues, the disability issues will actually get worse.
Okay, I'm going to call that a melange of a couple of different issues. So why don't I go first to you, Minister Bibeau, take what you want, and then we'll go to Mr. Ahmed.
Okay, let's start by the last one. Yes, my mandate is to refocus on the person the most vulnerable, and obviously the disabled person or person living with a disability are vulnerable, especially in emergency settings. We realize that, and we do support, but we decided to put the focus on women empowerment because I would tend to say that if we can empower women, the attention they will pay to other vulnerable groups, including people living with a disability and LGBT also, will be better addressed. So we do link it together, but we put more emphasis on half of the population. How this policy will live through any government, hopefully we'll be there more than 4 years. But we've been doing this policy thinking that it should last at least 15, no matter the government. We've decided to on these orientation and priorities based on facts. So we hope that it will survive after 15 years. Politics is what it is. But still, we are making commitments, multi-year commitments, because it's also good practice in terms of development and humanitarian assistance. We're trying to build partnership. We're trying to build new partners, or also new investors and new donors around these subjects. So obviously, if we bring private sector into it, and that they leverage, we use our Canadian contribution to leverage private investment, I think it will strengthen our priorities and our actions in the world.
Anything about unpaid care?
I think it will be more applicable.
We have a culture where what you said, women working and not paid, we don't see it like that. Because we don't have, for example, in Nigeria, an old people's home. The practice of taking a child to a daycare in the local communities is simply not there. The women are at home, they take care of the children, they take care of the aged, and they don't get money for doing that, but they get benefit and respect from the family for doing that. Remember that if they don't do that, then somebody else will have to be engaged to do that. And this is so because those women, they're not educated. They were brought up to be housewives, so that's all they do 24/7. That's all they do. They live at home, they work to take care of the house and the children and the aged that are at home. So in the European context, you will think that these are women that are working and not being paid. But in the African context, they're simply taking care of the home.
I would say that with our commitment for local women's organization, we will leave it up to them to decide what are their priorities to be empowered and to defend their rights. So we'll see if they choose this as being a priority or. But to be honest, I haven't heard that much during the consultation on that. I've heard much more about early marriage, for example.
But also that if these women had an opportunity to be empowered to do something else, then they won't be just at home taking care of children and the aged.
Great, thanks. A couple more. Let's go over to the other side of the room. Or not go to the other side. In the far, far back.
Thank you.
Yeah, there are 2 seats up front if people sitting on the floor are uncomfortable. Please, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Sophia Bourne. I have a question for Minister Bibeau. Could you elaborate a little bit more on where there's a place in your policy for engagement of boys and men? Because that's obviously a crucial part of any feminist policy. Thank you.
Great. And just in the middle here.
Hi, yeah, Louise Hemfrey from Womankind Worldwide. You talked earlier on about engaging grassroots women's rights organisations, and I was wondering if you could maybe divulge a little bit more how you plan to do that when you're coming from such a position of power over them, and can you really give them the freedom that they need to engage the way they want. From that particular power dynamic.
Great. Well, I'm going to ask a follow-up question from online as well, because we have Jen watching from Canada, who also wants to ask, I think, somewhat similarly to that second question, whether your approach is one that is focused primarily on working through governments to make policy changes, but also maybe funding. Be interesting for people to know whether the Canadian government does budget support or doesn't support governments directly, or do you do most of your work and delivery through civil society and non-governmental organizations?
Okay. Yes, it's true that I haven't talked about boys and men in this specific speech. I should have. I usually do. Definitely, we have to engage boys and men. And when we talk about offering the full range of sexual and reproductive health services, it starts with education, comprehensive sexual education to boys and girls. Because depending on the country and depending on the culture, why girls stop going to school is different. So in some cases, it's because of, early marriage, either because of the local culture or because the parents just are desperate and don't see any other opportunities or any other way to just take care of their daughter. In other cases, it's violence, gender-based violence. I come back from DRC. The situation is, and you know about it too. And in other cases, it's only lack of information. They have early, if I may say, active sexual life, and they just don't know about what's going on, and about contraception, about anything, about sexually transmitted disease. So we definitely have to provide this information to youth, to boys and girls, so they can understand, make good decisions, and have the supply if needed. You're right, and we need men to support and to build new good policies. And we were talking about traditional leaders. Their opinion is very important within the community, so we definitely need their engagement and their leadership within a community to change the rules and the way things are going on. Concerning the other question, budget support, Canada is doing budget support with some countries, but not with all. It's really a matter of having a long-term relation, having trust in the local government, having depending on the level of of confidence of the governance, if there's corruption or not. So depending on the country, we do sometimes provide direct budget support to the minister, not the minister, but the Department of Education or Health, or sometimes directly to the Finance Department to apply. For example, in Senegal, it applies to the whole development plan for the country, so it goes through the Finance Department. But it always comes with technical assistance and with very serious follow-up and monitoring and report when we do so. In other countries where we don't feel ready to proceed with the budget support, we give the money through international, Canadian or local organizations to support the system. So we can work with UNICEF or the Red Cross or UNFPA to support the health sector or the education sector. So it really depends on the country. But one sure thing is that we want to build sustainable development. We want to support a country to own its own education or health department, a system actually. So it's good when we can do it as close as we can with the local government, so they can own it. They have to invest in it themselves to build their local capacities. And the idea is we want the country to own it's to take its own responsibility and just to be there to support.
And I think maybe a question for both of you, the second question about, how grassroots, I mean, it's, how do you, you've got the money and the power, the policy agenda setting, how do you actually work effectively with grassroots organizations so that you're not just directing them, you're actually promoting and encouraging them to develop their own perspectives?
Well, if I may, earlier on I said that the only way we can make progress is to begin to create awareness at the community level. In some of the areas in Nigeria, it's only women groups that can actually access the women, because the women don't freely mix with the men. So, and then in the southern part of the country, in the southeast, the southwest, the south-south, they have this culture of groups. They call it age group. So there's women age group, there's men age group. And those groups are very, very strong. They meet very, very regularly. They exchange information. They support each other. And anything you're going to do at the community level, you'll be going through them anyway. So it's very easy to use them to pass information across to the women folk. Whereas in the northern part of the country, the women are, in some cases, not allowed to come out and mix freely with the men. So it's only women groups that can access them to create the awareness. Even when community health workers go about their work to distribute family planning products, they have to, they normally go together with women groups to help them get access and also to better disseminate the information on what they are there for.
Anything to add to that, or should I go? All right. Well, let's. Okay. So next round of questions, Sarah.
Thanks, Alex. Sara Pantuliano from ODI. Thank you for mentioning the partnership with ODI and making reference to our contribution to shaping Canada's humanitarian policy in particular. Now, one area where we really need your leadership badly is to try and help make humanitarian response less gender blind. And we would be delighted to work more with you on that. You mentioned that Canada will walk the talk. Can you elaborate on how you're going to make sure that your operational partners don't hide behind the usual excuse that it's impossible or difficult, but often they say impossible, to have more attention to gender equality in crises, in emergencies, in conflict, because they say it can be done, and of course it can.
This gentleman up front here.
My name is Celestine Malanda. I'm here representing a political party called the United Congolese Party, led by Christian Malanga, who used to be one of the military in the Democratic Republic of Congo, but because he has experienced what the woman was going through, I know everybody have known about the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is currently called a capital of rape. Everywhere you go, women are being, raped in a very appalling way, on the streets, even in the prison. When they are in jail for 5 years sentencing, they end up, they're sentencing with 2 or 3 children, and the people supposed to protecting them, they are the one raping them. The security officer was supposed to protect them, they are raping them. So he decided to join the politics. Christian Malanga. Now the gender is in the center of his policies. No, I'm just wondering whether Canada, with its policy, feminist policy approach, will be dealing differently, rather than being like a stereotype. If there is a way specifically to deal, with a rape issue, or how the Canada can partner with countries like the DRC, to address a gender issue.
Thanks for that question, and let me add, because I think it's very important. We haven't really talked about violence against women yet in this session, and I think the specific question on DRC, since you were just there, is a great one, and I'd love to hear that. But more broadly, it would be interesting. The SDGs are universal, and one of the reasons that the SDGs are universal is not just to make everybody feel good, but it's because these problems continue to exist all around the world. The problem of violence against women is not only a problem of Africa or Asia or Latin America, but it is also a European and North American problem. And so maybe you can talk a little bit about the continuing challenges at home of dealing with these and what we've learned from that, and both the challenge but also the humility that comes with knowing that these are challenges that continue to exist in our own societies.
Okay, so talking about the SDGs in Canada, yes, we do recognize that we have some work to do. And the best example in our case might be our relation with the Indigenous people, our First Nations. Data shows that children do not reach the same level of education. And we have a very important commission right now on missing and Thank you. Missing and I was looking for the word in English. Missing and murdered women within our Indigenous community, and we definitely have very important work to do, and our government has committed historic investment in this reconciliation process. Investment also in youth education, in bringing potable water, affordable housing, and also the issue of gender-based violence is critical in the north of the country. We do have this problem like any other country everywhere, but it's very significant in the north, and we have made significant commitment toward that. SDGs, the main objective is to end poverty, so I would say that another important commitment we've made in this regard is to invest significantly for affordable housing, which is, well, the one strong element of having a decent life is to have a decent home. So we recognize that we have work to do, and obviously we are very committed in regard to climate change, and we could talk about the 17 goals, but let's say that these are the main ones. DRC, yes, I was there 5 days ago. It was very hard to witness the importance of the violence against women in this country. And you asked if we, or how could we partner with DRC? Well, we first need to have a government in place, and we are looking forward for the election in DRC to have a government to work with, and we hope to see a government who will be really dedicated to the security of its people, and to end this major problem of violence against women, starting with the having a responsible army who is protecting the population. And I can give you an example of a very impressive project I visited, which is in partnership with UNFPA. It's called the One Stop Center. It was the first. I visited many health clinics supporting sexual and reproductive health, providing services, but this one was special because it included it was called the One Stop Center. So it included the medical assistance, psychosocial assistance, but also the justice and the economic empowerment component. So obviously it starts with receiving the victims or the survivors, should we call them, and to provide them all the medical services, and if they can get there within 72 hours, we can provide them with the medication to avoid a pregnancy or to avoid not be infected by HIV/AIDS, and provide any medical assistance that they need in their first time. Then the team is working with the psychologists, so to support them, because we understand that they've been through violent experience and they're going through a trauma, so they need psychosocial assistance. And when they're ready, they can go to the next step, which is having this conversation with a lawyer, with a police officer, and police officers have been trained to deal with gender-based violence. And they are able to sue the perpetrators, and I've had many testimony that the perpetrator has been sent to jail. So just seeing that justice, we can see justice. That was good. And when I talked with these women, obviously they talked about what they've been through, which was obviously very hard. Women and girls and boys, young girls and boys. But they were putting more emphasis on the last part, which is because this one-stop center gives them new tools or training or supplies to start a new business or to earn a revenue and to be able to have a second chance. If we're talking about a kid, it's then education, which is offered to the kid, and this economic these economic tools are offered to the mother of the kid, so to help them start a new life. And they were so grateful to Canada for offering this second chance. So there's a lot to do, but at the small scale, we have projects that makes a difference in the people's lives.
Maybe you can both say something really quickly about why it's not necessary to sacrifice our principles of gender equality during humanitarian crises.
Well, let me say that also in respect of the abuse that women go through, we have had this nasty experience of the abduction of the Chibok girls, which has continued to live with us, even though some of them have been liberated. But there's still a significant number, up to about 100 of them, that are not yet liberated. So it's something that lives with us. And even the others that have been recovered, the stories of the indignities that they went through lives with all of us. They're going through a lot of psychosocial support, not only for themselves, but also for their families, because the families were extremely traumatized for not knowing where their daughters are. So psychosocial support is not only provided for the women and the girls that have been affected, but also for the boys and men that have chosen to leave the insurgents and come back to mix with the people. Oftentimes, when these people come back, you find that they're not behaving like normal people. It's as if they have been brainwashed, and there is a lot of work that needs to be done to reorient them to be able to integrate more easily back to society.
Any final thoughts on the humanitarian before we wrap up?
Humanitarian, in the beginning when we started to talk about this feminist policy and having the obligation to have a women empowerment component within every project, I had pushed back for the humanitarian side, but it didn't. At the end, after having so many discussions, we decided that we will maintain this obligation. When we are talking about bilateral projects, so when we have one partner working in one country, this is definitely an obligation. They have to consult. And it was interesting when I was in Iraq recently, one organization thanked me for obliging them to have this women component. And I said, come on, guys, you're the one who told me that was the right thing to do. I said, yeah, but when we are into it, we don't always take the time to apply what we know is good. So definitely in our bilateral projects. For the multilateral, so when we give a contribution to UNICEF or to the Red Cross, which is to be applied on any emergency situation, then it's not linked as closely, but the representative of Canada around the tables where the decisions are made has the responsibility to make sure that we push this agenda, and we do. And I get feedback on that Canada is really pushing hard on our multilateral partners to make sure that there are women focus in our intervention in emergency settings.
So I've got some good news and bad news. The bad news is that people here and online have more burning questions, and I'm afraid we're not going to get to them. But the good news is that this conversation is going to continue in a more intimate fashion outside. We have a reception. So we're going to end by just asking both of you, first Minister Ahmed and then the last word to Minister Bibeau, if you have any final concluding remarks, burning things, and I'm just going to throw in something that you may choose to respond to or not respond to. We trended on Twitter, so thank you. You should continue to tweet right now, because what I'm going to say is that there is one Twitter user in the world who needs to hear this conversation. And there have been some subtle attempts, but I'm going to close by being less subtle. You have a prime minister who has made it his business both to focus on the issues that we are talking about tonight and to be a person who can speak to his large southern neighbor. So what what can Canada do to turn around this challenge? Because it's time to stand up and be counted. But let me give you, so choose or not to respond to that, but let me give you each a minute to wrap us up, and then we'll close.
Let me just say that because of the assignment that I undertake coordinating the humanitarian response in Nigeria, let me close on that. The humanitarian crisis in Nigeria is one of the largest currently in the world. We have had a lot of support from development partners, including from Canada. But the government of Nigeria decided it was going to take the lead role. And we have turned things around to the extent that the government of Nigeria is leading in the humanitarian response in providing food and providing health and resettlement plans. We continue to appreciate the support of our partners, but we wanted to be the ones in front for our people. And we are showing that it is possible. We have just embarked on the largest food distribution. I think that has been reported in recent years. About 30,000 metric tons of food is being distributed as we speak to the people in the Northeast that are in need. So is drug. In very difficult circumstances, we're using all kinds of logistics, including airdrops, and in a lot of cases using rigs and so on. We needed to show our partners that while the work that they're doing is important to us, that we also have seen that we need to up our leadership so that what they're doing is supporting us, not the other way around.
Thank you.
I would just say that I love to hear your conversation, because this is exactly what we want to do. We want the local governments to own his business and to be there just to be supportive and collaborative. So it's music to my ear. And I will answer your question by saying that Canada will stand for its values, and it includes human rights, gender equality, and which is not a value, but we will also work hard on climate change. And we will try to convince other partners to join using evidence, and to do so, we need you.
Well, in a non-religious way, I wish you Godspeed. And you guys have been a fantastic audience. Thank you for joining us. And particularly join me in thanking two powerful and talented women who have chosen to devote their lives and energies to promoting and empowering millions of other women. So thank you.